Hey there, Joe Brunsman, insurance broker of the stars, back with part two of my series on Spooktacular Cybersecurity Facts. Special thanks to CyberHoot for putting this together. Let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, first off, if you haven't seen part one, you can go ahead and link to that here, and you can go ahead and watch that for days 1 through 10. Otherwise, let's keep on rolling here. All right, day 11, privacy regulations. About 68% of countries do have some sort of privacy regulation. 100% of Americas do. What do we really think about this? Well, some of the takeaways would be, if you're an SMB out there, you really need to consider, just having a privacy attorney, either on retainer, or at least having some sort of relationship there. So, I speak to a lot of business owners about compliance. I'm not an attorney, but I do have a master's in cybersecurity law. And it just kind of comes up as we're talking about cyber insurance because I want to make sure that they are not going down a path that they may inadvertently not realize could really get them in a lot of trouble. So once we start digging into those regulations, a lot of businesses are just, quite frankly, shocked about the scope and breadth of those requirements found inside of there. So if you don't already, consider having that relationship with a privacy attorney. If you are sending information across national boundaries, you need to start asking about cross-border transfer mechanisms. Now, the applicability of those really varies based on your situation. But obviously, if you are sending that information across national boundaries, that's something you need to talk to that privacy attorney about to try and stay out of trouble. All right, day 12 here, stolen data value. Kind of the common trend you're going to see here is that something that can just be changed very rapidly, such as an online banking account number, that's generally fairly cheap, at least on the deep web. But something that lasts forever, like your medical information, your social security number, that value is a lot more valuable because it's just very difficult / impossible to ever change that type of information. So if you're a business out there and you're holding this type of information, probably the biggest takeaway here is that, it's just going to be a lot more expensive to you. And this information for your clients could just be gone forever. So the investment you're going to have is not reflected in that per record count you'll see on the screen in front of you. It could be potentially multiples of that, kind of depending on what you're doing. But nonetheless, that's just how the game is played. So you need to make sure that you're investing in cybersecurity appropriately. Next. All right, let's talk about consumer trust here. 64% of Americans would blame the company, not the hacker, for the loss of personal data. Now, is that fair? There's a lot of discussion out there about victim blaming and, hey, are we blaming the company even though they're actually the victim of this and now it's going to cost them a ton of cash? Well, I just kind of consider that a non-issue because at the end of the day, this is what consumers think. So we as SMBs and business owners, we need to consider that, yes, if we have private information of our clients, we need to hold that with due care. We need to have reasonable cybersecurity controls in place. We need to look at what those privacy regulations and cybersecurity laws may be mandating that we do on the cybersecurity front. If you haven't already, just talk with your IT guy, speak to your MSP, start looking at what additional cybersecurity controls you could put in place. And in a lot of respects, those basic controls are really not that expensive. And that's really, the heart of the issue there. Generally speaking, like the more we start going up that cybersecurity ladder with the fancier controls, there tends to be, I would say a decrease in the ROI with those compared to really the basic things such as antivirus, firewall, security awareness training, etc. All right, day 14, preparation matters. Yes, preparation does matter. So you'll see here, 76% of U.S. small to medium-sized businesses experienced a cyber attack last year, yet only 14% are prepared or ready to face them. One of the things that I always talk about here really is that you need to have defense in depth. Defense in depth, defense in depth, defense in depth. No matter what that cybersecurity vendor tells you, there is no magic bullet that is going to solve all of your cybersecurity problems. So you need to start thinking about procedural safeguards, administrative safeguards, and obviously the true cybersecurity control safeguards, like the technical side of it. So you really need to think about that defense in depth so that you really need to have as many layers of error possible before information can go out the door that you may not be able to get back. So really, really take that seriously there. Once again, a lot of SMBs that I talk to, they understand that cybersecurity is an issue. And then they think to themselves like, oh my God, this is so complex. This could potentially be so expensive. How do I even start doing this? Well, it's like that. I believe it's an ancient Chinese proverb. I could be wrong here, but how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just take it one bite at a time. You don't have to spend, half of your revenue this year on cybersecurity. That'd probably be pretty ridiculous. But at the very least, have a plan, get those basic cybersecurity controls in place, and then start advancing your way forward from there. With that, obviously, you want to talk to that privacy attorney once again to figure out, hey, what's actually just a blatant cybersecurity law requirement that you could be falling under. Day 15, social media. 84% of business owners reported receiving targeted and personalized spear phishing attacks last year. So obviously, I am on social media. You're probably watching this on the YouTubes, or you found it on LinkedIn or somewhere else if somebody else shares this out. And yes, we need to have our personality out there. It is a method of marketing, right? We're building trust with people. We're adding value to companies. But you really need to be careful about the amount of personal information you put out there. So really try and limit that personal exposure you're putting out there. Things that maybe you would think are somewhat innocuous, like, talking about where you grew up, talking about your first dog, talking about the names of your family members. Those could inadvertently be used by hackers to validate, say, changing a password somewhere, right? If it asks you what the name of your first pet was, or what's the name of the street that you lived on, what high school you went to, what was the mascot, etc. So those are kind of typically things that you just want to limit your exposure there. Just shy away from the personal side, stick to the business side, add value where you can. And of course, security awareness training. At the end of the day, they're going to come after us. Why? Because they're criminals and they just want to get money. So if nothing else, make sure you at least have the tools at your disposal to maximize your probability of spotting these types of targeted attacks, to minimize the amount of disruption that your business could actually go through. Day 16, patching. Patching. This is the beast of burden of every business out there. So 82% of discovered breaches occurred due to patches pending for months or years. What can we really learn from this? Before we go ahead, 300% surge in cyber attacks on the Internet of Things. So that's smart TVs, fridges, toasters, etc. All right, so takeaway here is, do you have a patch plan? If you have an internal IT department, now's probably a good time to start asking them, okay, how do we actually validate that patches occur? How do we know that systems are being updated properly? Is there any double check on this? Do we have any patches that should have occurred but haven't yet? If so, how do we get to the point where we're up to speed again? It's a difficult problem. It's very complex, but if you have that internal IT guy, at least have the conversation. If you have an MSP, just start asking them, okay, how do you guys validate these patches? Like, what's the process here? And you don't have to be a cybersecurity whiz. You don't have to be, an IT guru. Just at least pose the question there to try and make an informed decision for yourself. And okay, yes, Internet of Things is awful. Let's talk about passwords real fast. So this is where you can just pause the video and you can look at how long and the type and configuration of passwords here to figure out how long it would take someone to actually just brute force break into that system. Well, one of the takeaways here is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're actually now recommending password managers. So obviously go ahead and look that up for yourself, but generally a password manager, is it perfect? No, it is not. Just like any other piece of technology, it is not perfect. However, it's generally way better than anything we're going to do as human beings. So, kind of that general old school password methodology of uppercase, lowercase, at least 8 characters long, special character, etc. It sounds good in principle, but what actually happens is people just kind of have that base password. So if you're like, hey, every 90 days you have to change your password, well, what people end up doing is they just kind of have like a base password there, and then they'll change the last number. And obviously the hackers are aware of this. So if they find some password out there in the nether regions of the interwebs, they're going to use that as a basis of attack for the current potential password of that employee. So, instead of saying password 1, right, maybe now it's password 2, or maybe now it's password 11 or password 1 exclamation point. All of those things significantly, I would say exponentially lower the amount of time it takes to just brute force crack a password. So please be careful there. And of course, you can always use other emails. So obviously you don't want to use, your business email for all of your personal information. Likewise, it's generally kind of a good idea just to have one email, say, just for your bank, right? Or any sort of like really sensitive information. You could just have one email just for that thing. So that way you're really minimizing the odds. If you see any other type of email that hits that particular email address, you can immediately just discard that. It's a very easy way with something like Gmail. It's essentially free to really try and minimize your odds of facing a breach. Day 18, ransomware. Oh my God, do I deal with a ton of ransomware in this line of work. So it says that 1 in 5 SMBs report having fallen victim to a ransomware attack. 96% of MSPs predict ransomware attacks will continue at current rates or increase. I would say that it is a 100% guarantee that ransomware attacks will actually continue at current rates or increase. We're really seeing no indication that they're slowing down. So with that, here's a couple things you need to really take away. Okay, backups. You have to have appropriate backups. That's kind of just protecting against ransomware 101. Now you need to go and look up the 3-2-1 rule. That's a really good start for you. I'm not going to define it here. I want everybody to go out and look that up. So no, backups are not the fail-safe, the be-all, end-all when it comes to dealing with ransomware. But it is definitely a good first step that if you do get hit with ransomware, that's kind of like the immediate action item. And then hopefully nothing has occurred to those backups. Yes, they can encrypt the backups. Yes, they can steal your client and business information and threaten to sell it, thereby essentially negating a backup in many regards. But nonetheless, backups. It's going to be better than having no backup at all. I'll tell you that. And think about the periodicity of that backup. You don't want to back up every 30 days, I'd say for the preponderance of businesses out there, because you don't want to go back and potentially make up 59 days of work or whatever the case may be. That's a lot of work to try and go through, so you want to try and avoid that. Next, just make sure you have defense in depth. The easiest way to minimize your odds of being dealt ransomware is have that defense in depth, right? The more steps you have between failure and remaining secure, the better it's generally going to be for you. And of course, security awareness training. Yes, there are very, very sophisticated mechanisms that actually deliver ransomware, but generally those tend to be pretty rare. It's really the basics where I see businesses actually getting hit. And in my side, my line of work here on my side, in the cyber insurance world, we're dealing with, say, about a breach a week at this point, just with our client base. So, with that, security awareness training, backups. Make sure you're just doing the fundamentals correctly. Day 19, cyber insurance. Hey, that's me. All right, 68% of businesses have not purchased any form of cyber liability insurance. So what's the takeaway here? Obviously, that's me. This is what I do. You can also check out my book. So at the very end of this presentation, I think that a lot of businesses probably understand, like deep down, they're like, okay, we got to have cyber insurance. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there. They're like, okay, I don't even know what I need. My insurance guy can't really tell me. I don't want to look dumb because I don't know what to ask for. I'm scared about, filling out that application and potentially putting something in there that's going to come back and bite me in the butt later. All that stuff's inside my book. So there's going to be a link at the end of this presentation where you can actually download a copy of my book and just go through all those details for free. You don't have to work with me. That's totally fine. I can't insure everybody, but I would argue every small to medium-sized business out there, you really need to strongly consider cyber insurance. You cannot hide. They will find you. If there's any way they can make money off of you, ransomware, stealing your client information, and then going out and trying to hit your own clients with malicious malware, there's a million different ways they're trying to skin that cat. So please make sure you're properly covered. And, never let perfect get in the way of available. So, you're going to see a lot of stuff out there. Obviously do your homework, make sure that you're taking it appropriately. Make sure that you're educated enough to ask those questions appropriately. But at the end of the day, I would argue that the 50% solution is better than the 0% solution that's going to be 100% 6 months from now. I would much rather you at least have something in place and then we work towards those really fine details to iron that out, as opposed to you having nothing in place and then you get hit with some type of malware and you got to pay for the whole thing out of pocket, because that can get very, very expensive. All right, day 20, we're about to wrap up here. Cybersecurity jobs, 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs will exist in the US in 2021, up from 1 million in 2014. All right, what's the takeaway here? Well, MSPs are going to thrive in the next few years. If you don't already have an MSP, you're probably going to have one. Trying to do internal cybersecurity is just getting more and more complex and more costly. So you can imagine basic supply and demand. Hey, there's a huge demand for people who understand cybersecurity. There's just not enough of those people. What's going to happen? Well, eventually, the average SMB just won't be able to afford that internal cybersecurity expert or team of cybersecurity experts. It's just not going to happen. So that means that MSPs are really going to start thriving. If you don't have a relationship with one now, you may want to start poking around, just kind of starting to figure out, okay, what is this? What questions do I need to ask? There's a lot of information out there. Not every MSP is the same, so do your due diligence on that. Okay, with that, this is a copy of my latest book, Damage Control, Cyber Insurance, and Compliance. This is where you can go to download a free copy of my book. And with that, stay safe.